it's always a struggle. It's not like you wake up and say, I have an answer. I mean, life is a journey, and the journey is part of the process. It's actually the reward. I mean, it's a good thing, right? It's a good thing. But there's no answer that's going to say, okay, I got it. I'm done. Well, no. You're constantly asking yourself, you're constantly thinking about that. And when hard times exist, the ability to go back to who you are really helps you get through those hard times.
This is Find Joy with Joyan Season 2, where joy gets stronger, our community gets bigger, and together we become better versions of ourselves in a world full of limitless possibilities. I'm your host, Joyan Chan. And every Wednesday, we bring you inspiring stories that will light up your soul, powerful message that will make you go wow, and fun conversations that will crack you up with me and my special guests and friends. And it's my personal mission to empower you to live and lead a life with joy. If you are new here, this podcast is for you if you are looking for more joy, courage, passion, and purpose in your life. We dive deep into mindset mastery, spirituality, love and relationship matters, and how to manifest more success and abundance in all aspects of your life, however that looks. This podcast has got your back every step of the way. Now, without further ado, get ready to laugh, learn, and live your life to the fullest. Grew up in Alaska, served 26 years in the Army. He was in Pentagon during 9/11, then later served in Iraq before retiring from the Army. He later in executive levels of 3 corporations and now lives in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado, Winter Park. This summer, he took 34 days off to walk the 500-mile Camino Frances across part of France and of Spain. And now he runs a small LLC focused on helping startups and small businesses in the aerospace industry called One Call Consultants. And he is also the author of the book, Taking the Mask Off: My Journey from Dr. Seuss to the Bible. He is an avid pilot, volunteer, skier, and hiker. He's here today to empower you to take the mask off and get back to who you really are. So ladies and gentlemen, help me welcoming the multi-talented writer, the inspirational Keith Cooper. Welcome to the show. It's truly my honor to have you on the show today, Keith.
Hey, Joanne, it's great to be here. And it's great to be here with your listeners.
You know, when I was doing my research, I was just being mind blown. I mean, your background and your journey, your story, everything that you have done in the past is really impressive. So, you know, you served 26 years in the Army and you were in the Pentagon when the planes hit on 9/11. And you then served as a commando in Egypt when the Iraq War broke out. Your journey has taken you from the crisp air of Alaska to the halls of the Pentagon and the deserts of Iraq. Could you share how have these experiences reshaped who you are and your perspective on life?
Well, that's a great question. I think I'll go back to all those experiences you talked about. You know, service in the Army was an honor, and I still miss it, to be honest with you. Great leaders from around the world I had a chance to meet and learn from. And every assignment was something new. But let's go back to what I call the turning point of this whole thing was probably being in the Pentagon during 9/11. You know, we have this sense of security when we're in an office building, when we're not on the front line, that we're okay. And I think what 911 did, when you asked me, you know, the turning point and how it changed, it was when the plane hit the Pentagon that I was serving. At the same time the plane hit, like many others, I was looking at the crash of the World Trade Center, not knowing that the building I was watching the TV on, the World Trade Center, was being hit. So it made you vulnerable. And that's a whole theme for this whole part about changing, you know, being vulnerable, being open. Unfortunately, it made me understand that any place, anytime you could be a target. It made me appreciate how great our first responders really are because every day they go out in danger, just like our soldiers do, and they don't know what they're going to face. And I can only imagine the horror their families and everything else must face and worry. So that was the part when you talk about all the different things I've done. Now it's a turning point that really opened my eyes to being vulnerable and how vulnerable I was and many others were as a target. And from that point, I decided to stay another 5 or 6 years and serve my country.
So How did the experience then change how you show up in life, for example, after the 911 incident? How did you change you? I mean, in a way.
I I would just say this: you show up appreciating every single day. You show up trying to, as I read and heard in your podcast, invest in yourself. You showed up trying to be a better person than you were the day before. And you always are on this journey now to try to be today the person you would be tomorrow. So you're always moving forward. It changes your perspective, realize how short life is, Joanne. And really when you see these things and you have friends who are unfortunately in this situation, you take each day at a time, but you don't take the days for granted. And that's how it changed.
Yeah, and then leads me to the next question is something that I saw that in your book you mentioned. We'll talk about your book later, but it's something that is connected to what we are talking right now. So in your book, you mentioned that it's no longer a description of if your glass is half full or half empty. It's
Right.
now about how happy you are to have a glass. Is that what you have been trying to tell us? Being grateful and that you have a life.
Well, you're right. I mean, every time you talk to someone in the corporate world or the, friends, they always say, "Are you a half empty or half full person? Is your glass half empty or half full?" And I've come to the realization, I'm just happy to have a glass. I've come to the realization I'm just happy to have something to hold in my hand that would be able to hold the liquid or hold my emotions. And that's why really the book opens up to that, being appreciative for what you have, being appreciative for who you are. And Joanna, it tells the reader, you're good enough. I mean, you're good enough as you are. You're a good person inside. You know, be who you are. Don't let the imprint of mask or others shape who you are. And that's why I think, I talk about I'm just grateful to have a glass.
Mm. So why did you write your book in the first place? Taking the mask off. And you wrote this book when pandemic hit. So what inspired you to write this book?
Well, really, the title was last, so I kind of did things backward, right? I didn't come up with the title until I was pretty much finished with all the writings, but I wrote the book as a series of journals. I never intended to write a book. What I intended to do was have a series of journals during this time frame because everything was locked down. We couldn't go anywhere. The phone stopped ringing. I mean, all of the hustle and bustle really slowed down to the point that journaling became therapy. So every morning I got up, I would take the felt tip pen, the 5x7 notebook, and write down my thoughts. And the thoughts range from nature to um, business to anything that I felt on my mind. It was one of these deals that I didn't know what I was going to write, so I put the pen to paper because I started writing from my heart, not my mind. I had to make that 18-inch journey I talk about in the book, which is the longest 18 inches in the world, and be able to feel what I wrote. So the whole point was to write this for my kids, for something to remember me by. I had a series of 5 or 6 books that were full of my thoughts because at that time, as you notice in the book, we were locked down. My mother developed cancer and later passed. Relationships were falling. I mean, it's just a lot of things hitting me at once, but also hitting our world. I mean, I was no different than anyone else. So I wrote it for my kids. And then I let someone read one and they said, "Hey, you need to publish this." So at that point, it became a series of taking it from the journal to the computer, to the transcriber, to the editor, to the publisher. But all honesty, the initial intent was just to leave it in the journal form, never to publish. But when I thought I could help people who were like me and others, I said, well, they need to read what I wrote. And then after I had all the writings, I thought of what title fits all of this. And that's why I said taking the mask off. And that's what fit everything.
Do you mean we have to take our mask off so that we can live more authentically? Is that what you mean by taking the mask off? And if not, could you share a brief overview of the book and what is it all about?
Sure, I'll do both. What I mean when I say take the mask off is that as we get older, and I think you've got kids, and all of us have kids. Kids are naturally non-biased. They play with anybody. They love everybody. Okay. Then as we get older, we develop what I call these calluses of different masks that go on top of us. The mask of being happy when we're really not happy. The mask of conformity to be able to, fit in with your friends. And as we get to be teenagers, we go to college, we go to the workplace, we develop all these different masks. And even as we take some of the mask off, trying to be ourselves, we get these imprints on us. So what I'm talking about taking the mask off is be the person you were meant to be. We're all here for a purpose. Go back to that purposeful life, take those masks off, and as you look at the title, when I say my journey from Dr. Seuss to the Bible, remember Dr. Seuss, the cartoon character, be who you are, say what you feel, because those who mind don't matter, and those who matter don't mind. So when you go back to that cartoon, which is where it starts, Dr. Seuss, and then you look at the road that your parents taught you of what to do, and then you look at what's written in the religious aspects of things, it kind of defines a straight line, whether you're looking at cartoons, what your parents taught you, all the way to the religious aspect of things. And so we deviate from that line that we get in trouble. And what I talk about in the book are my deviations. I talk about things that I didn't do right so others can look at those. And then I talk about how they can get back on track, what they can think about. So that, hence, is the title of what taking the mask off means, and why it has Dr. Seuss to the Bible, has that road that we should all try to follow. However, we know we're going to deviate, but we'll always know where that road is.
That's really interesting. Yeah, because the other thing that I like about what you do and what you talk about that I also truly believe in is, I would say, it's one of your personal philosophies. It's because we tend to laugh at those who are different when we should be laughing at those who are trying to be the same. I really love that when I
You
saw
like that?
yes, it's like what I live for,
Yeah, yeah.
So, but not I would say many people are struggling with self-identity or trying to, living their life purpose or even finding their purpose, and living a life that is not theirs, but based on what other people want and expect of them, right? So what kind of advice would you offer to people who are struggling with societal expectation and the pressure to fit in, to conform?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. I would tell the younger me, okay? I would say the younger me, two things. Make sure your ladder is leaning against the wall that you want it to be. Don't climb the ladder so fast you forget what side the ladder's on. Invest in your passion. What do you want to do? Don't worry about money. I know it sounds important now, and especially as you're growing up, but you will live a longer, more healthier life if you do what you want to do. And it's not about not being social. It's not about not having friends. Heck, get all the friends you want, but find the friends who accept you for who you are. Don't find the set of friends that make you think you have to be like them. And when you find those folks who accept you as you are, they're your friends for life. And so that's what I would say to those who are struggling with identity. They know who they are. They know who they really were when they started off. Go back to those roots of what you learned as a young adult to what you believe in, and keep that identity that makes you whole. Be yourself. Don't try to be someone else. I see a lot of people always comparing themselves to sports figures or professional businessmen or politicians. You're like him. Well, truthfully, we ought to be like us, and we ought to be able to accept who we are and not try to compare ourselves to anyone out there, because we're special and we're put here for a purpose, and we're good the way we are. And that's what I would tell that young person.
Did you always know who you are and what your purpose is in this lifetime?
No. And I think a lot of times, well, for 50 years, I'll give an example. I always confused who I was with what I did. And you can play an experiment when you walk out of the studio. You can ask someone, who are you? And they'll say, well, I'm a pilot, or I'm an engineer, or I'm a sound technician, or I'm a plumber. Well, no, that's what you do. That's not who you are. Okay. Because if you stop being a sound technician or a pilot, you're still somebody. Okay. That's your job. Now, you may enjoy it, it may be your passion, but I think a lot of times we confuse who we are with what we do. And there are a lot of historical aspects of people who had that problem. And what they did is they did many jobs, they did many occupations to really get away from the job, but kind of find their inner self. And I think when you ask me who I am, well, I'm a son of two great people of the greatest generation we call in the United States. I'm a father. I consider myself a Christian. I look at those things that'll never, ever change when I define who I am, and not confuse that with what I do. But I think that is something that I struggled with, and I'm sure others do too.
Yeah, I really like that because I have been struggling with this for the longest time as well. I didn't know who I was, and when
Yeah,
pandemic hit, I went straight into depression because all my titles and all my friends couldn't go
right.
out, like you said, right? Were all being taken away from me, and all of a sudden, I didn't know who I was. Like, what is left is me,
Yeah,
and I didn't know who am I. So, and I really like what you said earlier, which is who you really are is something that will never change,
yeah.
right? So your job could change, your I know your title could change, but who you really are will never change. So how would you help someone who is struggling to find out who they really are? What kind of question should we ask ourselves to find out who we really are?
I think it goes back to the earlier question. Go back to earlier parts of your life when you had some a semblance of what you wanted out of life. In other words, go back to when you had some stability, some semblance of where you were. The last time you were happy was when? Was it when you were 10? Was it when you were 11? Was it when you were 12? I mean, they have to go back and kind of figure that out themselves and say, okay, what was the environment like when you felt that way and you had a sense? Now, maybe they're still riding their bicycle or skateboard or whatever, but they knew in that sense they wanted to be a happy young person. They wanted to be, a good um, kid for their parents. They themselves wanted to have kids themselves. They themselves wanted to. I mean, you can go back and what I call peel the onion skin off yourself, the calluses off yourself, and go back to that root of being a child or a young adult when you had that happiness and that feeling, and then say, okay, what was I thinking at that point? And then build from that. It's interesting to say a lot of times when we look at the issues we have, we tend to navigate from where we want to be versus navigating from where we are. And you have to navigate from where you are. And I think that when people look at themselves and say, I'm not quite where I want to be right now, where was I happy? You got to go back and figure that out and then move forward. And that's advice I would give someone who's struggling with that identity. Because the other thing I would say is it's always a struggle. It's not like you wake up and say, I have an answer. I mean, life is a journey, and the journey is part of the process. It's actually the reward. I mean, it's a good thing, right? It's a good thing. But there's no answer that's going to say, okay, I got it. I'm done. Well, no. You're constantly asking yourself, you're constantly thinking about that. And when hard times exist, the ability to go back to who you are really helps you get through those hard times. And we're a good neighbor, we're a good friend, we're a good sister, we're a good father, we're a good brother, we're a good Christian, we're a good Muslim, we're good, parent. We are all these things. And when you look at that from that foundational blueprint, it takes away a lot of the worry.
Yeah. So throughout your life, when was the most happiest moment of your life and why?
It's in oh yeah, it's in the book. It's in the first part when I talk about the cabin. I go back to my childhood having the honor to just to have a place to go in the summer. Started out as a trailer on a piece of land, and later was built up to a small 24 by 28 cabin. And some of the best things I learned were from the people who went up there to visit my dad and I, and my dad himself. Just words of wisdom, just good time with my dad, whether we be fishing or hunting or just sitting in the cabin during a rainstorm, just being able to spend that quality time. And Joanna, it goes back to when you look at the best time you've ever had, and I challenge your readers and your followers to say the same thing. When I think of the best time they had with a loved one, I would almost tell you it was never about something monetary. It was about a walk in the park. It was about walking the dogs. It was about sitting on the park bench. It was about going to a picnic. It was something that wasn't based on money. It was something based on being present. So when I go back to those happy times, it's about being present with my dad at the cabin. And that's what I write about. Just how important that is for us adults to be present with our kids, to be present with our friends. Put the phone down. It'll be there when you're done. Give them that time, give them that attention, and they will never forget it. And those are the best times you will have.
Yeah, I'm feeling emotional because also it reminds me of my time with my dad when I was young, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah.
true.
Great times.
So yeah, so sorry, give me a minute.
No,
And
pleasure.
yeah, so recently so what are you actually doing right now? I know you started your own business, which is crazy because when I was doing my research, besides being an author and in the army, you have quite an experience in the aviation industry, right? Before running your own company, you served at Boeing as the vice president of the training and professional services. So why did you start your own business?
Well, I've worked for 3 large companies, and I've decided that what I really want to do is focus on the small and the startup companies. Because even in the Army, in the 26 years I served in the Pentagon, I served operationally, I served overseas, etc. And I even served in the contracting realm in the Army where I learned how to buy things for the government. But taking all that experience that I had and taking the experience I had in the corporate world, which was pretty much large corporations, I wanted to give back. So I started a company, One Core Consultants. And all I focus on are startup companies and small businesses. Businesses that don't have a lot of capital, businesses that really are looking for a direction to go, how to widen their market space. And the way I base the company is on performance-based consulting. In other words, Joanne, when you see a lot of consultants, they always want to say, here's what I charge per hour. Well, I only charge if I'm successful. So I immediately tell that person, I've got skin in the game when I help you. If I can help you, and it's a two-way street, we have to talk. If I think I can help you, then my skin in the game is if you don't benefit from my help, then I don't get paid. And that's a focus I have. And that's why I want to work with startups. I want to work with small businesses, and I want to make them successful so they can support those large companies, so they can support the Lockheeds and the Boeings, the BAEs and others with their products and services. And I think that's where we have to look at. I'm all about, you know, finding these companies that have a lot of technology, a lot of know-how, a lot of ingenuity, and they've got an easel and a kitchen table, or they working out of their garage. That appeals to me. That's where we really start finding our great companies. If you look at some of the background of our big companies, a lot of them started out in the garage and the kitchen table. And that's where I want to be. Getting my hands dirty, having skin in the game, and making sure those leaders from around the world who have such passion are successful. And that's why I started my company.
Yeah, that is beautiful and very motivating. I mean, all my listeners, most of my listeners, I would say they are business owner or entrepreneurs, so we know exactly what their journey is like. So what is the number one struggle do you think most entrepreneurs face? Like aspiring entrepreneur, first time entrepreneur, what is the number one struggle we all face? We all.
Well, the first struggle you face is not getting into the market space. The
Yeah.
first struggle you face is confidence. I mean, the first struggle everybody faces is, oh, guys, I'm not sure I can do this. We got
Yeah.
this company out here, this company, or this looks like it's saturated, or my product will never work. You've got to get out of that self doubt. You just got to put the self doubt away. If you have something you believe in that's strong enough, that's the first struggle. And that's kind of an unforeseen struggle because that's a struggle I don't see a lot of times and no one sees. But what I would tell them is if they think they have something, bring it forward. Okay. Even if they don't have the capital, let's talk about it. Let's see where it might be needed because that's something that, could be beneficial. The second struggle, which is probably the most visible struggle, is where to start. What do I do? What process do I have to go through? Series A funding and being able to get recognized. Do I want to go public? Do I want to stay private? Is there a way I can partner? So the second part is the unknown environment. The real struggle and the real challenge that's faced out there, once those two are overcome, is some entrepreneurs don't understand the big environment they're facing. In our country, we have to worry about government shutdowns. In our country, we have to worry about climate and many other things that may affect the product you're going after. So having a wonderful solution is great, but now you're facing with, okay, what's the environment? What's the timeline? What's the funding cycle for your particular product? If it's going to the government, you have to understand the calendar. You have to understand the buying process. So that's the first top three things I would say any entrepreneur coming in has to look at. Get rid of the self-doubt, got it. Make sure you understand the timeline and then go from there.
How do we really get rid of the self-doubt? Because I remember when I first started out, So, okay, how about you know, as entrepreneur, we all know that success is not a straight line and there's no overnight success. We have to
Right.
keep failing and failing and failing. How do you get so confident enough to keep failing and failing and over and over and over again? You try everything and nothing is working. How do you keep going when you just nothing is working? You don't see any results. And you started doubting
Well,
yourself, right?
no, well, I'm gonna give you a quick answer to this. And first thing I'd say is your podcast do a good job. Your podcast do a good job of taking the self-doubt away when you talk about, I think one of the things you talked about was visualize yourself in 2024, right?
Mm.
People have to get a mentor and they have to get someone who's been in the business before. And it's important to have that friend or mentor or companion who can get you through those self-doubt times. Joanne, everybody, you, me, have gone through those lulls, those valleys of doubt. And we've been there and we know what it feels like. And the new person is going to go through it too. We need to be there for them. So when they knock on the door, we can say, okay, here's what's going to happen. Here's what you're going through. My recommendation is you do this and this and this and let them get out of it. But mentorship, partnership is key because those are just normal, I call them normal business cycles, okay, that people will go through. And the entrepreneur, it's so easy to quit. It really is, and walk away. But I would just say, get a partner, get someone who's done it before, let them walk with you and they will see you through. And that's kind of what I do too.
Yeah, which is why you need a consultant or mentor, like you said, right? Which is why you started your
Yeah.
own company. The last thing that I want to talk to you about is about the 500 miles you walk. For sure, right? I have to ask that. So, again, what motivated you to do that?
Well, I'm going to go back and just say that life is a journey and the journey is a reward. And sometimes when you don't feel grounded along your path, you got to take time off and go do something else. And even though I wrote the book before going on the walk, even though I know what line I should follow, I kind of felt I wasn't grounded and I needed to take some time off. So in June, I decided to get ready to walk 500 miles. So I took off in September and I went down to southern France and I walked across Spain in about 32 days, part of France and Spain. And during that time, I grounded myself, got back into where I needed to be, got in that sweet spot of understanding myself, making sure my mask stayed off because you just don't take them off and they stay off. Like everything else, you have to work on it. And I made sure they stayed off. I met some wonderful people and I learned some key lessons. And I'll share a couple with you. I learned about pain, people, and stuff. Pain meaning that I think from day one I hurt. The first day was crossing the Pyrenees, and every day I walked from 13 to 24 miles, depending on the different legs. So I was always moving, and my legs hurt, my Achilles tendons hurt, my knees hurt. I mean, there were muscles I didn't know I had. And the only thing that made the pain go away from my knees is when it went to my Achilles. The only way it went from my Achilles is if it went to my hips. So it just moved along, but I learned how to deal with it. It taught me about how tough our first responders are, how tough our soldiers and military members are as they deal with pain every day, both physical and psychological. And then you learn about people. There were people from 50 different countries on that trail that I'd meet every day. And I would learn, I would talk with them. I, I, I saw people who were very, very wealthy. I saw people who weren't wealthy. And Joanne, the common denominator is they were still trying to find who they were. Okay.
Wow.
So it didn't matter if they had, $1 million in the bank, or it didn't matter if they didn't have a bank account, they were still trying to find. And I think the most inspirational person I met on the trail was a young lady who was 27 from the Netherlands. She was walking with a rucksack 3 times my size. It was huge, sleeping bag, backpack. And I was walking with her, and she was still walking faster than I was with all that weight. And she conveyed to me that she just got frustrated back in her hometown, and she sold everything she had, put her money in the bank, and everything she owned was on her back. And I thought, wow, what a refreshing feeling. 27, everything she has is on her back. And I thought at that point, that not only was I going to go back to my home and get rid of my stuff, but I was going to take the stuff out of my mind that was still bothering me, the stuff I didn't have any control over, the stuff that I'd worry about that I couldn't do anything about out too. And I was going to just cleanse my mind of not only physical stuff, but mental stuff. And that's what that 500 miles taught me. It was probably, I would say, aside from the kids in my life, the most inspirational thing I've seen and done.
That is beautiful. And I totally relate to that because last year in October, it was my birthday and I went to this aerospace camp track. It was nothing as
Yeah.
compared to what you've been through. It was how many days? 14? Yeah. So it was, I would say, 12 days of trekking and walking and in the
Right.
mountains, right? It was beautiful. And I also learned about a lot about myself and life. And I met a lot of wonderful people. And I didn't know that I actually had the strength that
Yeah.
I didn't even know that, you know, existed within me. But I really just have to like keep pushing through every single day. So thank you so much for sharing all your wonderful life experiences and your insights. Is there anything before we end? Is there anything that you really want to talk about? Perhaps I didn't ask you or didn't let you today.
Well, I think we talked about everything that I would expect. I would just say that I'm so impressed with your show, your podcast, and your 2024 layout of the 5 things that you put on there. I really, it touched me. And when I looked at that, I could actually go over each one of those things and talk about the book in many ways. So I want to thank you for helping the world with your podcast and the people out there. It's a lot more visible than you think, and you move a lot more people than you believe, because people you move others, and it just has a flywheel effect across the board. So hopefully, together, you and I and many others out there doing the right thing for the right people can make a difference in our world.
Thank you so much for saying that. It means a lot to me. You wouldn't know because podcasting is my passion. It's just like you writing a book and helping people. Yeah, it's my passion. It's my purpose. I believe, right? And it's what I see myself doing for the rest of my life. I know it's a huge commitment, but that's really who am I, and what I
Yeah,
mean.
yeah.
But before we end, we always end with our final 5 rapid fire questions. So these are the 5 questions that I ask all
Okay,
my
I'm standing
guests.
here. Go.
that I ask all my guests at the end of the show. Now, you're ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. The first question is, what is one thing you wish you knew earlier?
Um, I wish I knew the importance of helping our climate earlier in my life. I wish I had not neglected those things.
Wow, I wasn't expecting that. The second question, if you could live your life all over again, what would you do differently?
I would stay in Alaska and I would be a bush pilot. I would fly hikers from the lower areas to Mount Denali. I would be taking in sightseers. I'd be flying small planes and have a little float plane out parked in a log cabin and a family and just live in Alaska.
Wow. What is something you're trying to learn or curious about right now?
I'm trying to learn about how to make myself a better person for my partner. I'm trying to learn about my endeavors and not being selfish on improving myself, but improving myself for the reason of helping someone else. And that's what I'm looking at now. Self-improvement is really what I'm looking at to be better, to be better, to be a better human being for that person.
Well, as the saying goes, if you want to change the world, you have to go home and change yourself first. Right?
That's exactly right. And
Yeah,
and before you can love someone, you have to do what?
love
Love
yourself.
yourself.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's true, isn't it? Especially when you're flying, right? Put on your
Yes.
oxygen mask first before you help someone else. It's a classic example. Yeah. The next question. If you have 5 minutes and the whole world is listening to you, what would you say?
I would say to the whole world, take a breath. I would say to the whole world, let's forgive one another and give one another a second chance. We've all made mistakes. We're going to make mistakes. But the truth is, the mistakes don't get us in trouble. It's how we handle those mistakes. So, given we have already made the mistakes, let's take a step back, put the weapons down, start the dialogue, and say, we can exist with one another. We can live with one another. Disagreement is not disrespect. So let's agree to disagree. Let's sit at the same table, enjoy a meal, and let's try to solve our problems with diplomacy, with a mutual understanding, but most of all, Joyan, a mutual respect of one another. And that's what I'd say to the world.
It's beautiful. That is beautiful. Yeah. I wish I could broadcast this to the whole world, but we are not there yet. But we are very close, right? Hopefully one day.
Yeah, hopefully one day.
Last question is, what brings you the greatest joy?
Wow. What brings me the greatest joy is being told that I made a difference. We spend the first 40 years of our life acquiring. We spend the first 40 years of our life trying to build things, homes, equity, get cars, get all this stuff. And then we realize one day that we have fewer years left on this earth than what we used. And at that point, it becomes, what's our legacy? At that point, it becomes, what are you going to leave behind? And I would say the thing that would bring me the biggest joy is knowing that I made a difference in someone's life.
You certainly do. Thank you so much for being on our show today and making a difference in our listeners' life. And now tell my listeners, are you active on social media? My intuition is saying no, because my gut is saying no, but where do you want people to connect with you?
I'm not active. I'm on LinkedIn. I don't have Facebook or Instagram, but I'm on LinkedIn. And my website for my book and a lot about me is World Wide Web, www.longlakelore.com. And that's where kind of my biography is, kind of where the book is, etc. And I've got another book coming out in December, a novel on the Cold War, which is written and should be going to the editors very soon. So that's kind of how you follow me on that website. Would love to get feedback. I really would love it. I'd love to hear people think. I value your feedback. And as I mentioned in the book, there are about 65 short stories there. I have about another 150, which I haven't published, and they're on different topics. So all this writing during COVID amounted to over 200 stories. This book has about 65. There's a lot more out there if the readers want it.
That is beautiful. Thank you so much. Yeah, so my intuition was right. You are not active on social media. So guys, I hope you loved it. I know you love this episode, because otherwise you wouldn't be listening to the very end. So go follow Keith on LinkedIn, visit his website, get his book, follow him, so you get you know when his book, the next book, the new book, is coming out in later this year. Share this episode with your friends and family. Take a screenshot if you're listening, and share it with all your social media friends, because this episode is life-changing. I will leave all the links in the show below, so make sure you go and visit them and thank him for coming to our show today. Also, remember to subscribe so you never miss another episode coming every Wednesday. And follow me on Instagram if you haven't already, so we can hear from you and connect with you. And I will always leave you the same way as I leave you with every other episode. Show up, the world needs you, and you need you. Thanks for listening, and I wish you all a joyful and amazing day ahead. Bye, Keith. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you again for tuning into Find Joy Joyan podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, take a screenshot and share it on your IG story and tag FindJoyJoyan_podcast so I know you are listening. And leave us a positive review on Apple Podcasts if you haven't already done so. And remember to hit the subscribe button whether you are listening on Spotify, iTunes, Amazon Music, or any of your other favorite platforms. If you love what we are doing and want to become one of our sponsors, you can send me a DM to connect. And thanks for being here. I will see you soon in the next episode.